Welcome everyone to another episode of Out of the Fog. I'm your host, Laurabel. On tonight's episode, we get to sit down and have a wonderful conversation with Miss Penny Rowe from the Community Sector Council. So sit back, relax, and we'll be right back.
You're watching Rogers TV St. John's. You're watching Rogers TV St. John's.
Welcome back, everyone. We are now joined by the incredible Miss Penny Rowe from the Community Sector Council. Penny, thank you for joining me.
Real treat to be here with you, Laurabel.
So I know a little bit about you, but our viewers might not know so much about you. So do you mind telling them about who you are and how you got involved with everything?
Well, it's interesting. When I went to university first, I took a degree in speech pathology.
Okay.
And when I moved back to St. John's, I think I was the first person who was probably academically trained as a speech pathologist. So CBC thought that would make an interesting interview. So I did my interview, and when the show was over, a producer came out and said, "How would you like a job with CBC?"
Wow. Okay, so school for speech pathology, came back and got into television.
And to be totally truthful, I did some private speech pathology, but I didn't work full time as a speech pathologist. But it was fascinating work that I did. I worked with a Dr. Max House, who at the time was a very well-known doctor in St. John's, and he would bring me in to work with clients of his who had aphasia and other real difficult speech issues. But when I went to work with CBC, the first show I had was called Fun in the Sun.
Okay.
I grew out of that fairly quickly, okay, and eventually was offered a very nice contract as the first person external to CBC who was hired to work with Bob Cole,
yes,
who was a well-known broadcaster, and Harry Brown, who was a well-known CBC broadcaster. And we actually were the first people who set up Here and Now.
Okay, so you started with speech pathology, came back, we're doing Fun in the Sun with CBC, and we're the first for Here and Now. So what experience was that like for you?
Well, it was what I found really interesting when I was working with Here and Now was that I was really attracted to issues which had to do with public policy. Okay. It wasn't something I had planned for, it just was something that occurred. And I remember doing some really difficult stories and caught on fairly quickly that there was far more to the story than just what we were seeing on the surface. There was a reason why the story had cropped up.
Yeah.
And that's when I started to develop a genuine interest in how government worked and what created policy and how society worked and what things were kind of a little bit off balance.
Okay.
So after that experience with CBC, I ended up as a journalist with one of the local daily newspapers. And again, found myself always being drawn to the stories where I felt there was something that needed to be challenged.
Okay.
Then I left the province for a year. And when I came back, having spent a little bit of a stint, just before I left the province for a while, I was the first person hired to set up the Early Childhood Development Association.
Okay, so we did broadcasting and journalism and on to early childhood.
Yes, because by this time I had children who were young, okay, and I'd become interested in enrichment programs,
yes,
childcare programs. So I did a stint as the executive director with the Early Childhood Development Association. In fact, I acquired the funding,
okay,
so we could set the association up so they could hire me. That's fairly usual in the nonprofit sector.
Yes.
And then after I had moved away, when I came back to the province, I saw an advertisement from what was then called the Community Services Council. They were looking for an executive director.
Okay.
So I applied for the position,
okay,
and got it. So the organization was in fact created intellectually, okay, by a group of other people and I was the first person they hired to put the organization together.
So what was the goal of the organization when it was originally created?
It was very similar to what it is now. It was about trying to connect organizations, because there was a lot more fragmentation in the nonprofit sector than there is now. We were also wanting to look at promoting policy, making good connections between organizations, federal government, provincial government, and local governments. So in fact, the organization, it has been really true to its purpose. And in the early days, a significant amount of the work that we did was really trying to look at and understand volunteerism. So one of the first programs we set up actually was a volunteer center. And then the second program we set up, and really interesting, is this is still quite active, we developed a directory of nonprofit organizations. And anyone who goes to the community sector website now, one of the really interesting features is we have an online directory that hosts about 2,600 nonprofit organizations, and people can go in and search those by community, by type of organization. So the organization has done an awful lot from its inception to where we are now, but it's always had the same motivations, and that is to look at where there are policy gaps, look at ways in which we can enhance community organizations, the way we can support them. And really, that's what CSC is all about. It's kind of, we've got the policy tack, we've got the identifying gaps, we've got helping organizations set up. But for me, looking backwards, I think the most fascinating thing is when we started the Community Sector Council, there were so few organizations that had any consumer engagement at all.
So CSC has been around now for at least over 10 years.
CSC has been around since 1976.
So it's older than I am, which is really fine. But what is the one thing that you want our viewers to know if they're looking to know more about CSC and how it contributes to the community?
Well, this is the most difficult question, and people often say that CSC is the best kept secret in the province, even though we have massive amounts of contact with thousands and thousands of organizations and people. But because we do so many different things, sometimes people don't really understand what the whole organization is about. And really what it's about is trying to support other organizations in any way we can, to develop policy, to increase the appreciation of what the nonprofit sector does. So as you well know, and many of our viewers would know, there are thousands and thousands and thousands of people in this province who, every month put in a lot of time as volunteers. We couldn't have nonprofit organizations if we didn't have volunteer boards of directors who got incorporated and who were the governing structures of our organizations. The other part of the sector that has always been a big fascination to me is the economic value of the community sector. And over the course of time, we've done a fair amount of work looking at what is the community sector, what is the public sector, and what is the private sector. If we talk about government, people have some sense of an idea.
Yes.
If we talk about the private sector or the business sector, people have some concept of what the private sector is, but most people didn't really have an appreciation of the collective value of the community sector. So we're learning a great deal more about now the numbers of people who work in our sector, how nonprofits, particularly in smaller and more rural communities, are often the economic engine. They are the central part of what's making that economy tick. So for instance, if you think of a theatre company going into a small community, going into a region, well then suddenly there need to be beds and breakfasts. There need to be hotels, there need to be restaurants, because if you're bringing tourists in, then you need to have services for them. So I think the point I'm trying to make is that one of the things that I really like about Newfoundland and Labrador is that we're small enough to actually be able to connect the dots all the time. So just about anything that happens in this province really is a three-way partnership, if you will. Because most of us know people who are politicians, we know people who are the bureaucrats, And one of the things I've learned is that just about everybody has the same wish and ambition for the province.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter whether you're working in a small grocery store, whether you're running a big corporation, whether you're an elected politician, whether you're working in a nonprofit or a volunteer. Most of us have that same desire to really shore up our province and to make sure that it's a wonderful place for us all to live and to attract new people to come to live in our province.
Oh, that's really true. And I think I definitely connect with the fact that it is a three-way partnership. So we touched a little bit earlier about volunteerism and how close that is to you and to CSC's mission. So what does CSC do to promote volunteerism?
We do that in many ways. A large part of what we do now is working either individually with organizations who want to learn how to govern themselves perhaps in a new and different way, and to make sure that their board members know about board governance. We do a lot of strategic planning. We do work with organizations to help them learn how to recruit volunteers. There was a time when we ran a volunteer centre, but we came to the conclusion we didn't need to do that anymore now because organizations have their own capacity. But we actually have people working in different parts of the province now. So, for instance, down in the Bjorn Peninsula, we have a regional facilitator, and a lot of the work that she does is work with local organizations, locally based organizations, to help them get better at recruiting volunteers and to figure out how to run their programs. So she can do that on the ground in that region, just as we have had for many years now an office in Gander. And so our staff person in Gander can reach out and work with nonprofit voluntary organizations. And we have actually been celebrating Volunteer Week since 1978.
Oh, wow.
That was when we had the first Volunteer Week in this province. And we connected with National Volunteer Week across Canada. But it's interesting because, you know, you asked me before, how did I get where I am now? And there was one thing I didn't mention. I had during the course of the years some significant political involvement.
Yeah.
So I was married to somebody who's a politician, so that sort of brings you into the trenches. But I had actually been elected as the Vice President of the Liberal Party of Canada.
Okay.
At a time when nobody expected that, and I was extremely young to have been elected. But that was an extraordinary experience because, again, a lot of the work that we did in the political realm had to do with policy.
Yes.
And it had to do with, you know, what your values were or how you thought governments should be run and, you know, the kind of approaches that you took. And so when I came to the Community Sector Council, I'd had an array of experiences. And they all, I remember being interviewed once by a national journalist, and after she'd spent some time with me, she sort of quoted me as saying that when I found the Community Sector Council, I was really finding my own comfort zone and being able to use the skills and the education I had and to put it to practice in a way that really has no bounds. Really has. That's what I love about CSC. Every morning when I get up, there's something new, there's something different, there are new people to meet. But watching over the years, you know, coming back to the point I made about when CSC started, people involved in our sector now, and people involved in business, and people involved in government, we have so much more diversity.
Yes.
And we have so many more young people involved. And, you know, there was a time when, you know, a large part of the volunteer base would have been people who weren't working, women who were striving, desperate to find something that was their own when they were still housewives. Okay. I mean, this is long past history, but it's an important part of our history because it's how we have evolved as a province and how we've evolved as a sector and as a society. And so many of the men who were involved, a lot of their involvement was restricted maybe to athletics and to coaching, and so we see much more melding of what's going on in our sector now.
So what do you see for the future of CSC, and what do you see for your future?
Well, that's the question I love. It's very easy to look backwards and talk about history. And of course, we haven't even touched on much of the history of CSC, but it's kind of what goes around in circles sometimes. And, and I often laugh and I say, you can see the future, but some of us have a very long rear view mirror as well. And one of the first things that we did at CSC was we discovered that there was absolutely no training for anybody who worked in a childcare centre.
Okay.
So we actually established an educational facility and set up a one-year program to train early childhood educators, because nobody else in the province, none of the colleges, either private or public, were willing to do that.
Okay.
And so we, after 12 years, had trained, I think it was 220 people as early childhood educators. And eventually the college said, look what they're doing, it's successful. And we said, yes, we're a social research and social planning organization, and by operating for 12 years, we have shown not only does it need to be done, but it can be done successfully and financially successfully. And in fact, we operated it as a social enterprise. Now, we didn't know that language then, but that's what it was. People were paying fees to come into our courses. And now, full circle, we're now at a situation where we finally have this wonderful agreement between the federal government and the provincial governments to have $10 a day daycare. Well, that means we're going to have to be training many more people, establishing nonprofit facilities. So a lot of that exposure and experience that we had many years ago at CSC is now something that we can bring forward in helping us as we move in new directions. So, kind of taking the past, the present, and moving into the future. It's often not quite as distant as we think it is. It's a question of how you can tie it all together. Because we do learn from our past, but we certainly want to learn from our future as well. And we do that by looking at the present and where we are and how we get people engaged. And, certainly, the whole issue now of how volunteerism has changed, which I referred to a minute ago. Volunteerism is often and most frequently done in the context of an organization.
Yes.
So you're sitting as a board leader or you're a volunteer with an organization. But there's a new trend now that we're all trying to track. And that is people who do what we call informal volunteering, where people will do something on their own, not in the context
that we're used to seeing
of a formal organization. So we've got maybe 40 or 50% of our population, when the last big survey was done, who say that they've done individual acts of kindness.
Yes.
And it's not affiliated with a formal organization. And in that way, we have more people who can do things how they want to do them themselves. And I think we're seeing that trend particularly with younger people and perhaps with people who are moving into our province who want to do things a little bit differently.
Well, that's fantastic. So if people wanted to learn more about CSC, where would be the best place for them to check out?
They could phone us, which is what we'd really love, at 753-9860, and we also have a toll-free number. And they can go to our website, which is communitysector.nl.ca. And I'm told our website is a challenge. There's so much on our website. It's really tough sometimes for people to navigate their way through. But if anybody's willing to take the time, they can really find a lot about what's going on. And a lot of the work that we do now as well that I haven't mentioned is creating opportunities for young people.
Okay.
Whether that's as volunteers. So we run the Go Getters program, which is just spectacular, where young people join the program, do 120 hours of community service, which will probably really change their lives because it will change the direction that they take as a result of the opportunities they've had. We do a lot of employment programs. Each summer and rolling into the fall, we have a program called Amplify, where we actually provide and find employment for 175 young people in every nook and cranny of the province. But what's different about that program is when the young people are employed, they have to do career development and professional development. And that's something that they really love. And each year we try to do something new and creative for them. So once they've had the employment experience, they've also had, maybe we do programs in, looking after yourself, mindfulness, mental health, as well as doing job resumes. So we try to mix it up to give people a really good experience, which will help them in their futures.
Well, thank you so much for joining me. If you had one last thing you'd wanted to say to our viewers, what would it be?
Thank God you're doing your own show here at Rogers, and we hope we see more of you.
Well, thank you so much. It's been an absolute honor to get to find out about all the great work CSC has been doing for all these many years, the ability to fully entrench themselves in the community, and for community members to reach back out and grow the volunteer experience. So we're going to be in the midst of Volunteer Week, so this is a great time that we've gotten to sit and spend with you, and I look forward to seeing more of the work.
And there's one other thing I'd like to add that we're about to roll out.
Yes, please.
We're getting ready now to do a series of what we call flash surveys.
Okay.
And we're going to be sending one out a week to everybody in the nonprofit sector to find out what's important to them. What is their status? How are they faring now that we're opening up again after the pandemic? So that will be something that people can be looking forward to as emails, direct emails from us, and on our website.
Well, thank you so much, Penny. It's been amazing to get to sit and chat with you, to find out more about who you were, the face behind CSC, and to find out about the great organization you happen to spearhead. And we'll be right back, everyone.
It all started when I racked up some serious debt. Interest payments were going up, creditors were calling. Janes and Noseworthy came up with a plan. Knowing that the phone was going to stop ringing and that I was not in this alone was a huge relief. Bankruptcy or a consumer proposal or whatever help you get is not the end. It's just the beginning. A chance to start again with knowledge and support and people in your corner. Are you ready? Get out of debt. It's okay.
Learn more about Leah's story at janesnoseworthy.ca.
And that was a really interesting interview, and getting to hear all about the wonderful stories from Penny's life and more about all the great work the Community Sector Council is doing within our province when it comes to volunteerism and promoting policy. So we're going to leave you now with a snapshot from the Community Sector Council Snapshots.
We love to give back, and we'll keep doing it.
Volunteering looks great on your resume, but it is so much more than that. Through volunteering, you can contribute to charitable organizations, support the local economy, and help spread that Newfoundland and Labrador hospitality that we are so well known for.
Shop local, because when you give to these businesses give back to the community, and that is so important.
Brings so much to our community. It's pride and ownership.
There are some things in life that a nonprofit can do that otherwise simply wouldn't get done. There are things that if you were motivated by profit, you wouldn't tackle, you wouldn't do just because there's no possibility of profit involved in it. But that does not mean it's not worth doing.
And everybody is welcome, and the more we get in, the better it is, and they feel good, I feel good about it.
We feel it's important that we maintain the cultural and the historical facts of our community, and to bring them forward to other people who visit the area, or to maintain a good history for the citizens in our town.
I'd advise anyone, if there's something comes your way, that you can get an opportunity to volunteer, get out, because the experience that you'll get, you'll never forget.
Say, come up, sit forward.
You've been on Thursdays.
I like to know what we do.
It makes me pretty happy when I see what I done.
It does it all. They make the jewelry and have a bit of fun.
Alrighty. Just visiting the museum and seeing the smiles on the faces of the clients as people like say, you know, what a wonderful job you've done.
But when you have a client say to you at the end of the day, this is the best day I ever had, no matter what went right or what went wrong, that gives you what you need to go home and come back tomorrow and try again.
I just love what I do because it's amazing seeing the faces of the seniors that we assist every day.
I work for a volunteer board of directors, and it is their hard work and dedication to the organization that has enabled us to do the things that we've done.
I like working in the nonprofit field because I mean you're able to interact with the community and help people really on a ground level.
I've been working with the Smallville Crescent Community Center since 2011.
I've been working here for the last 3 years. I've been here 12 years.
I've been with Smallwood now going on 12 years.
Hi, my name is Laurabel, and I'm principal of King College, Marystown. We strongly feel as a community college it's important for our students to be involved in volunteerism. And that takes on many meanings, for their resume, for their own personal and professional growth. And we learn just as much from the students as they learn from us. So we must lead by example, and we're very proud to promote volunteerism in every sector.
It's a way for me to get involved in my community, which is oftentimes difficult for youth.
I volunteer because I think it's important to build up my resume and get experience in social situations, as well as become an active member of the community.
I think there's a fulfillment within yourself if you volunteer, because you're helping out people, getting more people involved in your community.
If you have a comment about this program, we'd love to hear it. Email or call us, or send us your feedback through social media.
This is Rogers TV.